Psychology of Love by Sigmund Freud. Introduction. Understanding Freud. Suspects exist about Freud's information gathered from sexuality researches and the relationship between man and woman. At those periods, moral values and prohibitions make it almost impossible to discuss sexuality. Freud's researches make this subject more attractive, but on the other hand, his revolutionary ideas were causing reactions in many quarters, especially in the psychoanalyst field. It is a fact that the concepts Freud put forward and the findings he obtained through his psychoanalytic researches have always caused controversy. And thanks to these discussions, his perspective on sexuality has changed a little. A bit, as the wall created by moral values, religious pressures, and prohibitions that had to be overcome at that time was too high to be easily overcome. To understand Freud and the difficulties he had to face, it is better to take a look at that period, because the number of colleagues who objected to his ideas, concepts he puts forward, was quite a lot. However, Freud continued his studies without interruption and made great contributions to the development of psychoanalytic theory. Even these days, his concepts are a big part of psychoanalysts, but to understand Freud, it is necessary to consider the differences and changes in thought, knowledge between the social life of the period he lived and the modern life of today. Today, the accumulation of thoughts and knowledge of the individuals who make up society are much higher when compared to that period. Besides, the modernization of people's way of thinking and the normalization of certain things, especially sexual freedom, has led to progress in overcoming some oppression and prohibitions on sexuality. We can imagine the difficulties Freud faced at that time and how he might have had a hard time communicating his ideas with people, especially the experiences he had from his patients. Despite this, he has succeeded in establishing the accuracy of his work gradually over time, and in his psychoanalytic work, he has been a pioneer and guide for many psychoanalysts. This situation made him the father and founder of psychoanalytic theory. On the man's choosing a specific object. Psychoanalytic treatment studies allow us to collect enough data about the love lives of people with neuroses. It is also worth remembering that it has been experienced that people who can be considered more or less sane are also capable of showing similar behaviors. The data obtained as a result of experience and knowledge gained over time reveal certain types very clearly. And now, we are going to describe a specific object choice of man, because even if it is quite surprising, the conditions of love can be characterized and described psychoanalytically in the easiest way. 1. It can be said that the first of the conditions of love is quite characteristic. As soon as we uncover it, we can begin to look for the existence of other characters of this type. It is the case that the man chooses only a woman to whom another man has the right, instead of choosing a free, young girl or a lonely woman as the object of love. This condition is sometimes too necessary that a woman who is downgraded and neglected, because she did not have it at first, becomes an object of love the moment she starts a relationship with another man. 2. However, it is not very often experienced, the second rule of love is quite attractive. The biggest point that differs it from the first, this is because it only comes into play when it meets the first. Whereas, for the first such thing is not the case, it can always occur. The main factor that constitutes this condition is that the chaste and honorable woman can't attain the title of the love object. Yet this is the case for a woman whose sexual reputation is questionable and whose loyalty and reliability are questioned. These kinds of men are only triggered by jealousy, the passions and interest in women of this type, and it is never possible to backfire such an important opportunity that allows them to feel and experience these extreme feelings. The strange thing is that this feeling of jealousy is directed not to the real owner of the woman, namely her husband or lover, but rather to others, strangers, men who appear suddenly and may cause suspicion of the woman. 3. The most surprising fact for the observer is the saving intention of the woman that these types of people fall in love with. The lover thinks the woman is always in need, will be regretting if she loses him, and she will completely lose her moral stance, so he sort of thinks that by not leaving her, he saves the woman's life. The most common reason for humiliation in a love life. The trauma caused by the obstacle of sexual satisfaction does not completely get lost in relationships in the following years. However, limitless sexual freedom does not provide a good result. On the other hand, reaching the satisfaction most easily decreases the need for love. The further increase in libido can only be an obstacle to it. For this reason, when natural obstacles are not sufficient for the desired satisfaction, more traditional obstacles are introduced. This is valid for all people in all periods and all the society. For example, during the decade of antic civilization, love lost its value and life became meaningless. For this reason, powerful reactive equipment was needed to recreate the emotional values needed by humans. In this context, we can say that the Christianity Sofu movement succeeded in creating spiritual values for love, which ancient paganism never managed to create. This trend also reached the highest rank of the priests who spent their lives in full possession of their own self and struggling against the temptations of the libido. Basing the challenges that arise here, or organic impulses, on global characteristics may be the first thing that comes to mind. It is also a fact that the mental state of the impulse generally increases due to a disappointment. If we starve different people with different characteristics, as the feeling of hunger gradually grows, the differences between these people disappear, and only this strong and inexorable hunger will remain in its place. But isn't it a reality that when the impulse is satisfied, the spiritual value decreases just as quickly? What about an alcoholic's relationship with wine, for example? No matter how much he drinks, the wine will always provide him with toxic satisfaction, as poetry is thought to provide erotic satisfaction. Has it ever been seen that the drinker quits or changes his drink habitude just because it no longer tastes the same? On the contrary, the habit of drinking alcohol always knots the drinker tightly with the wine he drinks. Is there any drinker who travels to countries where wine is quite expensive or not allowed just because staying away from alcohol? Of course not. When we take a look at famous alcoholics such as Böcklin and their relationship with wine, we may see the same traces of a happy marriage walking in harmony. Then why a lover's attitude differs quite a lot to its sexual object? We need to make a point in the long and troubled development of the sexual drive. When we select the object, the ultimate object of the sexual drive is the first, not the original object, but only its replacement. Psychoanalysis has shown us that if the first desired object is suppressed, they can't provide satisfaction, since none of the unlimited numbers of substituted objects can replace it. This may explain the inconsistency in object selection, a need for arousal that often characterizes the love life of adults. It is not easy to train love impulses. From time to time, they go too extreme. Sometimes they cannot be trained enough. It does not seem possible for civilization to do what it hopes to achieve through education without the loss of pleasure and satisfaction. The prolongation of taking action manifests itself in the form of sexual dissatisfaction. So we will have to accept that it is impossible to provide a balance between sexual impulses, desires, and the requirements of the basic judgments of civilized society. We can neither avoid, give up suffering, nor the risk of extinction after human cultural development in the distant future. But this pessimistic diagnosis is based on a single assumption. It is also clear that cultural dissatisfaction is the final result of some traits that arise from the necessity acquired by the sexual drive that is under the weight of a civilization. Taboo of virginity. When we follow the way of love for a woman, it seems like a prejudice for the first time. A young lady who keeps her virginity makes a long and stable relationship with herself that no one can be able to reach. This experience puts the woman in a state of addiction, which ensures that she will be able to dominate herself enough to resist external temptations and new emotions. Sexual dependency term is first found in 1892 by Richard von Fraftebing to describe the possibility of reaching an extraordinary dependency level with the person whom there is a sexual intercourse with. This dependency may be exceeding from time to time. Free will might get lost, and it may reach a point where you can make any kind of sacrifice and endure everything. Also, the writer mentions that if a relationship lasts for a while, a little bit of dependency is necessary. This dose of sexual addiction seems necessary to keep the marriage in civilization and curbs the polygamy that threatens it. On the other hand, an extraordinary degree of love and character weakness, on the other hand, unlimited egoism. Kraft-Ebing attributes the reason for sexual addiction when these two come together. However, analytical experience suggests that we cannot be satisfied with such a simple explanation. Some spiritual consequences of anatomical differences between the sexes. While deep diving into the oldest spiritual structures of children's sexual life, we have made it a habit to consider boys as subjects. We have to know that the first stage that can be determined for sure in boys is the Oedipus complex. The Oedipus complex takes its name from the ancient Greek tragedy. This tragedy of Sophocles, in which King Oedipus killed his father and married his mother, provided a good opportunity for Freud to address the impact of incest on his early life. This is quite easy to understand, as the child is protecting the object loaded with libido while breastfeeding. Seeing his father as a rival who is disturbing and wanting to get rid of him and replace him is a natural result of the situation. We don't have a clear view of the prehistoric state of the Oedipus complex in boys. At these times, we know that the boy was in an affectionate identification with his father, not involving a sense of competition that was not related to his mother. During the examination of this problem, it is possible to draw some conclusions that may shed light on the prehistoric past of the Oedipus relationship in girls. Every examiner has come across a woman who stubbornly and intensely depends on their fathers and their desire to have children from him. At this point, it is easy to get the impression that we are dealing with a fundamental and non-analytical phenomenon of the child's sexual life. A detailed analysis of all these events brings to light something different. It reveals that Oedipus complex has a long prehistoric past and, in some ways, is a secondary formation.